the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
Right.
She's not going to be safe with the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Why?
I'm a narcissist.
And if you disagree with the sentiment, just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Well, seeing those clips may not come as much of a surprise to learn that Snow White is bombing at the box office. And knowing that this backlash was growing against Rachel Zegler and many of the comments that she had made about Snow White, and just overall the fans not reacting well to it, Disney had delayed this movie for a few years, and it has finally come out. And while technically it is #1 at the box office currently, when we take a closer look at this, it's pretty evident that this movie is not performing well, and that this basically was something Disney more than likely knew was going to happen and was trying to spin it through the media and really kind of control the narrative. And it doesn't look like that worked out. But we're going to take a closer look at this. We got an article here from Forbes. And then also what this means for Disney going forward, because they had a very good 2024, undoubtedly. But 2025 is not shaping up to be the same in terms of momentum. And perhaps this movie and some other ones has hurt the momentum that Disney had going into this year. So we're going to get into all this. So hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic. And this is from Forbes, and it says, yes, Snow White is bombing at the box office. This is written by Paul Tassi. So Snow White did not impress critics with its 44% score on Rotten Tomatoes. But even with a higher 74% audience score, the movie is currently bombing at the box office, at least according to initial figures. Snow White brought in $87 million in its opening weekend globally, with just $43 million domestically. That may not mean much out of context, but compared to the other slew of recent live-action Disney adaptations, that's definitely in the bomb territory. And here's a list of the same opening weekend time period domestically. So The Lion King did the best, $191 million. Beauty and the Beast, $174 million. A lot of these are around the $100 million mark. Even Snow White and the Huntsman made $56 million, and currently Snow White is sitting at $43 million, just only outdone by Mufasa, the Lion King, at $35 million.
This is terrible. Terrible.
It says there are very few ways to spin that. Snow White is close to the worst performing live-action Disney adaptation ever, doing not even half or a quarter as well as the higher-up ones on the list, and reviewed more poorly than essentially all of them, which is no doubt a contributor here. Says there's one thing to note, however, that could be a glimmer of hope. The lowest film on this list, Mufasa the Lion King, opened poorly, but over time, despite being an original production, snowballed into eventually making $717 million worldwide, a huge hit, but that feels like an anomaly rather than something that's going to happen with Snow White. And you knew this movie was in trouble, and this is from World of Real here, where it says Disney's Snow White undergoing more reshoots. This was back in June 2024. It says principal photography on Snow White began March 7th, 2022 and wrapped up in June 2022. So they've held on to this movie for a while. So next year's release will have been almost 3 years after production had been completed. However, there were additional photography reshoots done on the film in June 2023. Now it's being reported that another round of reshoots are currently occurring in London. This was confirmed by Gal Gadot, who says stars in the film as Evil Queen. Rachel Zegler, who plays Snow White, is also in London for the additional photography. According to Forbes, Disney spent $209 million to produce this upcoming live action. A few months later, the Daily Mail, not the most reliable source, mind you, reported that figure actually to be $330 million. Could be higher if they had multiple reshoots. As Disney does not have the practice of shooting low-budget movies. They tend to always go in the $200 million range, if not higher, for some of these. So it seems to be even animated ones have this price tag. Disney's original plan was to nix the iconic dwarves of the original and replace them with characters rumored to be magical creatures played by normal-sized actors. After much backlash, the company reversed this creative decision and decided to include CGI dwarfs into the film. Despite all that, dwarf actors who can barely find any work in Hollywood still lost potential acting gigs in this movie. And they lost gigs in this movie because of Peter Dinklage from the Game of Thrones. Not associated with this movie. I don't know if he's ever done anything with Disney. He was on a show or a podcast and basically made some sort of comment that he thought it was appalling that there was still a movie being made featuring dwarves and like mocking it in a way. And Disney's reaction to that was to no longer include actual small people into the movie and instead changed up where they were going to put these magical people in them. Then there was backlash against that. And then Disney went, okay, we're going to put the dwarves back in, but they're going to be CGI. So at the end of the day, Peter Dinklage cost a lot of actors roles where they would have made money, and you ended up with dwarves in the movies anyways. So this movie from the get-go, not only from the comments from Rachel Zegler and the comments about how this was going to be different from the original, it was even more controversy with people even outside the movie and Disney feeling seemingly like they had to react to it. I mean, Disney could have just ignored it and moved along and nobody would have paid much difference to it because it's Peter Dinklage. I mean, he's a fine actor. He's good in Game of Thrones, but I don't think his comments are going to really change anything or the way people feel about this movie. But Disney felt they had to react to it and make it right, and they ended up making another problem for themselves. So this movie has been plagued with issues from the get-go, seemingly. The original 1937 film was directed by a few animators, one of whom was the late David Hand. Hand's son, also named David, called this a reimagining of his dad's film a disgrace, and that Walt Disney and his dad would be turning in their graves if they were alive to see the new version. Probably so. Zegler also received some pushback for comments in which she called the animated classic weird, like we saw before, described Prince Charming as a stalker, and last year she also referred to the upcoming remake as the PC Snow White. So she's out here really promoting the movie really well. Doing a great job. I think a lot of the issues with this movie are simply from Rachel Zegler, saying that this is not basically anything like the original Snow White, that the true love's kiss is not part of this, the prince is not a major part of this, and it's more of a story about a girl becoming a leader and overcoming a kingdom, essentially. And this is not what the original Snow White was about, and it's a bigger deal than some of these other live-action remakes where they don't pay homage to the original content, the original ideas of the movies that it's being made off of, because Snow White is the movie that basically made Disney. At the time, Walt Disney was not what we know of Walt Disney now, banked everything on that movie and was able to make it into a success. This is one of those movies where you should be paying, a lot of respect and homage to, and to basically just not having respect for the original, thinking that, it needs to be updated. These are the changes that need to be made. And even if you felt that, I think the worst person to basically parlay that message is and was Rachel Zegler. More than likely what she was talking about in terms of the remake of the movie were things that Disney told her probably to say, or this is the basic talking points of this movie, and it wasn't received well. And so she got the blame for it. A lot of it is because how she also delivered it. But I think in terms of some of the backlash she's gotten, at the beginning of it, probably a lot of it was not necessarily her fault, as she may have been thrown to the wolves a little bit. But since then, she has not helped herself by any means. And Disney delaying this movie by doing reshoots and just sitting on it, hoping that enough time would pass between a lot of the controversial statements and the movie coming out where they could try and make more money off of it, I think ultimately was a mistake. I think you should have just released the movie, take the hit then, and then move on. The reason I say that is you had a really good 2024. You had 3 movies make $1 billion from Disney. So solid years, especially considering the years prior, things were, I guess you could say, inconsistent at best when it comes to the movie performances. But now you're going into 2025, and you had Captain America, Brave New World, not doing great. Basically, it's in Eternals territory, and for the MCU, that is not good. And it crossed over the $400 million global box office. $400 million for a Marvel movie or a Disney movie is not deemed a great success. So I think when you're looking at this and then going into this movie now, so now you've got Captain America, Brave New World, you've got Snow White not doing well. You've already lost all the momentum you had in 2024 from those movies. Whereas if you would have just released this movie when it was supposed to come out, you go into this year, Captain America doesn't do well, but Snow White being so, I guess you could just say glaring, because there's so many people that have been looking at this movie and just without seeing it have not liked what they've heard about the movie. So the only way this movie was going to be successful was if it was one of the best movies that was ever made and was able to overcome the narrative that's already out about this through pop culture, social media. And that simply just, I don't think it's the case. I think we're seeing that from the critics. You're talking about over here on Rotten Tomatoes, 43% on the critics, 74% from the audience. My wife and my daughter went to go see the movie, and my wife's not as critical as me, but she said the movie's okay, but if you know Snow White, then they changed a lot of the things in that movie. And she's just like, it's not Snow White. Like, it's an okay movie, especially if you didn't know Snow White or anything like that. But a lot of the choices they made or anything like that, like, it's just not remotely the same thing. But nothing that, you know, she wants to see again, and really nothing our daughter cared that much about. She actually likes the original cartoon better than the new movie. Our daughter said that the cartoon was fun and had moments that were, you know, more levity to it, whereas this movie has a very like serious tone to it. There's not much comedy at all besides the Seven Dwarfs. And so the tonage of it, I think, is very different even from the original cartoon. And I don't imagine this will be in theaters that much longer. If it has a really bad second weekend, if it doesn't do what Mufasa did, which I don't see this movie doing that, I don't think this is going to have a very long theatrical run. And then I think pretty quickly Disney is going to mildly promote it on Disney Plus and then probably never talk about it again. And what's even really interesting is, you know, Disney knew this likely was not going to perform well, because even in their quarterly earnings reports, they never once, Bob Iger never once got out there and started touting Snow White as an upcoming movie. In fact, in the most recent one, they were touting Lilo and Stitch, which is yet to come out. There's just now a trailer really out for it. So they are already looking past Snow White. So while I don't think it was just Rachel Zegler's comments that has led to this movie's not performing well, I think also just the way that Disney, you know, knowing that this movie had such importance to the company itself and the fan base, and really treating it the way they did, not giving it the respect, feeling like it needed to be updated and we're going to change this movie. I think that set fans off the wrong way. But Rachel Zegler also did not help anything. And I think combined with all of this going on and just really led to this bad performance at the box office. And I don't think it's going to get any better in the second weekend. If it really falls off a cliff and it's really, really not doing well at the box office, they will pull it out, because the last thing Disney wants from an optics standpoint is a movie that is tanking even further. Though the first part of the box office for 2025 has not been great for Disney, looks like they probably have a hit on their hands with Lilo and Stitch, as that trailer actually looks pretty good. Looks like it pays pretty well respect to the cartoon of Lilo and Stitch. This comes out in May. I do think that movie has the potential to be $1 billion movie if it is good. As you know, I know in our family, our kids love Stitch, so it's got a fan base with kids, and it does have nostalgia with a lot of people that grew up with that movie. So very well could move on very quickly, make money with Lilo and Stitch, and more than likely never talk about Snow White again. But in terms of this movie, I suppose a legacy you could use as a learning point to show actors and actresses how not to basically present a movie, and then how not to attack a fan base over a movie before it's even remotely close to even coming out. This was even way before the movie was coming out, before these things started being said. So honestly, this movie never really had a chance in terms of coming out of the gate. Nobody else to blame here but Disney, as they're the ones that made the movie. They're the ones that created the story for it. They're the ones that hired the actors. And they really should have just released this movie back years ago, took the lump then, and moved on. Who knows if it was worse or better than it would have been years ago, but maybe they made a little bit more money than they would have back then. But either way, that's going to be it though for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of theme parks and pop culture. And let us know in the comments if you saw the Snow White movie, what did you think about it? And if you didn't, was it because of Rachel Zegler's comments? And until next time, we will see you later.